My name is Robert Breedlove. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I don't think I'm worthy of it, but thank you nonetheless. Very happy to be here at Market Disruptors Live. And so today, if you guys have followed my work, you might know I have a reputation for going deep or maybe being a little bit dense on some of these topics. Today, I'm going to try to go through 10 things I've learned by being in Bitcoin. And it's pretty high level, but it's going to cover a lot of ground. It's going to be a download. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So the first thing I'd like to start with is ideas. First thing I've learned, ideas are foundational to everything humans do. This is really important. Everything we say, we do, or we make, it starts out as an idea. If you look around this room, this whole building started out as an idea. The structures, the language we use, everything. We're tool-using creatures, and they all start as an idea before we manifest it into reality. And among these things, these ideas that we imprint into the world, tools and organizations are among the most important. And we'll come back to this towards the end. Secondly, all human organizations are businesses. I think a lot of people here as entrepreneurs will understand this, but we often get caught up thinking that certain institutions might be different from businesses, but ultimately they're all wealth acquisition strategies, as I like to call them. And so humans, we are more productive operating together than we are in isolation. That's why we have to organize ourselves. This is an irrefutable economic reality. Like you can't avoid it. And it's like the old adage, many hands make light work. We all get that. But it turns out in the global economy, many minds make light work, right? The more we work together and trade ideas, the smarter we become, the more wealthy we become. And so there's two strategies for wealth acquisition. There's the entrepreneurial strategy, which is creating value and trading with one another. This is a positive sum game, right? We become more than the sum of our parts. The second wealth acquisition strategy, which I call the statist strategy, is taking. So this is taxing trade. This is taking away from the wealth of others. This is a zero-sum game. This does not create more wealth. So you have making and you have taking. Right? This is a big lesson, I think, in that there's only two ways to get wealth in the world. It's either making or taking. And these strategies are mediated through property. I'm sure you've heard of property rights, et cetera, et cetera. Which gets me to the third thing I've learned by being in Bitcoin, which is property is a relationship. It's not a thing. It's not the table. It's not the stage. It's not the building. It's the relationship that's acknowledged between the owner and that asset. So there's a reason when you own your home and you come home and you see a guy sleeping on your couch that doesn't belong there, you can kick him out, right? Because it's your home. You have a relationship to that house that he does not have. And the purpose of society is to preserve those relationships, to preserve property. And so property starts with a very basic form of reality, which is you own yourself. Each of us is self-owned. If I try to move my left arm, it moves. If I try to move your left arm, nothing happens, right? We're all self-owned. You can't even argue it away. To try to argue about it is an expression of your self-ownership. And in that frame of owning yourself, you also own your own time. This is really important. You choose how to spend your time, what to do with it. And each of us go into the world, most of us, express this individual self-ownership through work. Thanks. And so property, as we typically conceive it, the things that we own, becomes an extension of this self-ownership. Right? We're imprinting the world with our ideas, with our work, and the things we create that are valuable through either us directly creating it or trading with others become our property. So property is an extension of your own most personal property, which is yourself. And so property in the sense of maintaining that relationship is a list. It's a list. It's, I own this house, I own this car. If someone takes it, I have recourse to the law to go and get it back. The state, historically, is the list keeper, right? You have a deed to your house, you have a title to your car, you have money, which is basically a certificate for capital. And these list keepers historically been necessary because you need to make sure people don't break in, take your stuff, whatever. The problem, of course, is that we had to actually trust this human organization that is a business to maintain the integrity of that list and to not violate it to their own benefit, which is something we've seen a lot of in human history. So things like eminent domain, property tax, fiat currency, inflation, all of these things are a violation of property. This is a theft of time from people. It's very important to realize. And if you've ever, I don't know if you guys are on Twitter or not, but if you've seen Nancy Pelosi's portfolio tracker, the Twitter bot, has anyone seen that? She's just radically outperformed every major investor the past 10 years magically. Like, how do you think she's doing that? She's violating your property. So, go to the next point. This is point number 4, I think. Oh, it's okay. I'm just going to read it to you. Did you want to see it? you got to talk to the tech guy. So the 4th thing I've learned being in Bitcoin is that wealth is free time. Like, we think wealth is stuff. We think it's money and all of this, and to some extent it is, but it's ultimately just free time. Because each of us, we have a finite lifespan. So the more free time we have, that is wealth. Tools and capital and money come into the equation because they put us closer in time to satisfying our wants. So for instance, if I want to go from New York to Los Angeles, it's going to take me a long time in these shoes. But if I have a piece of capital like a car, that's going to put me closer in time to satisfying that want of going from New York to LA. Therefore, that car is capital. To own a car makes me more wealthy, right? Nothing has changed about New York and LA. They're the same distance apart. But if my aim is to travel between the two, capital makes me more wealthy by making me achieve it faster, letting me achieve it faster. A jet would save me even more time. And that's why a jet would make you even more wealthy. So becoming wealthy, it's not necessarily about having the most money or stuff. It's really acquiring the most free time. And this is proportionate to your wants in the world. And so ideally, you're doing this by spending your time working in something that you enjoy, right? This is the thing that everyone desires, to make your passion your profession. This is the ideal reality where you spend your time working to earn more free time. So the other option, you could also just really lower your wants a lot, right? You could just go be a monk in a monastery and not want anything, and then you'd be wealthy, technically. You'd have a ton of free time. So you don't need money necessarily. And, oh, I've got it right here, thanks. 5th thing I've learned, being in Bitcoin, money is a tool, right? Time savings, to generate time savings is the purpose of every tool. The reason I use a shovel to dig a hole is because I can dig more shovels per hour than I can with my hands, right? Tools give us wealth by saving us time and satisfying our wants. Money is a tool used to calculate, negotiate, and execute trades more quickly. And as we said earlier, the entrepreneurial strategy of creating wealth is trade. So if we trade with one another more efficiently, we create more wealth. That is the purpose, one of the purposes of money. So money accomplishes this by putting everything in a common language. So instead of saying, this house cost 11 cars, I say this house costs $440,000, and these cars are $40,000 each, right? It's a common language of numeracy. It's easy to understand. So money is something like literacy and numeracy in a way, and that we put it in our mind and think through it more often than we think about it, actually. And it lets us increase wealth through trade. It lets us store that wealth, which is something money's supposed to do, not that it does so well today. And it also lets us express the value of wealth in prices. Which takes me to the next thing I learned being in Bitcoin, and that is that money is not a government creation. We all grew up, I think, thinking that it was, because we've always just had paper in our pockets, it's government issued, in God we trust, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not how we got money. money arises naturally once we started to engage in trade. Once we figured out, hey, working together, we're more wealthy than we are working in isolation. As we started to trade, the thing that became most tradable, right, the most liquid asset, that is by definition money. So the common example is like, you may have heard of people in prison trading cigarettes as currency. That's just the most liquid asset in that little trade network. So cigarettes become money naturally. And it's basically this course of people trying to satisfy their wants, right? You're trying to trade this thing for something more tradable to get to the object you ultimately desire. And in that process, something necessarily becomes most tradable. Whatever that is, that's money. Simple as that. Sounds simple. There's a lot more to it, and there's a reason we selected gold, but we'll get into that later. And although there never seems to be enough money, one thing we've learned a lot repeatedly throughout history is that printing money does not work. Sounds like an easy solution. There's not enough of it. Print more of it. What's the problem with that? Brings me to the next thing I learned by being in Bitcoin. And a lot of people really like this one. Inflation is legalized counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is criminalized inflation. They are the same thing. There is no difference. Given a choice, every rational human would prefer to hold a money that cannot be counterfeited, cannot be inflated, because that would give you the maximal ability to preserve wealth across time, because no one else could dilute you, right? So that's pretty obvious. And as it turns out, inflation resistance is one of the main reasons gold was chosen as money historically. And if you've listened to my show, you've probably heard me talk about this ad nauseum, so I'll try to go fast. No matter how hard we try to produce gold, we just can't produce it more quickly. It's the hardest asset to produce in human history, hardest commodity to produce. And for a number of other reasons, it became money, right? We all understand intuitively gold is valuable. Very few of us understand why. There's a deep history there, been around for 5,000 years. Take me at my word today, gold is money. But here's the problem with gold. Gold lacks portability. It's hard to move across space, right? It's heavy, it's expensive to secure, it's cumbersome. You can't transact in it easily. So what did we do? We're humans, we're entrepreneurs, we figured it out. Hey, let's just put all this gold in one place and issue a paper token redeemable for gold, and we'll trade this paper, which is much easier to transact, as if it were as good as gold. Problem solved. Gold's portable. What's the problem with that? We introduced the need to trust human beings with our gold, holding our money, right? You say you have 1,000 ounces on reserve. Do you actually? Or did you just print more paper and tell me you do and traded some of it out or loaned it out? So we introduced counterparty risk in the form of the currency issuer, which ultimately became the bank, and today is the central bank. And that is why central banking, again, if inflation and counterfeiting are the same thing, central banking is a giant currency counterfeiting operation. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I think if you study the history, you'll see it to be true. Now I'll mention Bitcoin here. Bitcoin's really important. Why? Because Bitcoin's the only money in history with 0% unexpected inflation. 0. 21 million, that's it. No one can do anything about it. It's the only fixed supply asset we've ever had, which is to say it's the only asset in human history 100% counterfeit proof. It cannot be counterfeited whatsoever. Staggering. It's a staggering invention. And so Bitcoin optimizes our ability to preserve wealth over time by virtue of being immune to inflation. We've never had an asset that was actually immune to inflation like Bitcoin. And this is why so many of us call Bitcoin incorruptible money. It's the first man-made institution that cannot be corrupted by man. It's really incredible. So Bitcoin matters, in my opinion, because gold simply cannot scale without banks and central banks. And I think most people understand here that we've been abused by these institutions via inflation for a long time. Because again, if all organizations are businesses, these organizations are accountable to their own bottom line. They generate revenue by printing money. The number one export in the US is inflation. We export inflation to the rest of the world. So these corruptible organizations are fixed by Bitcoin, if you will. And the end game of gold is what we use today, this irredeemable promissory note to gold called fiat currency. I'm pointing to my pocket because I have money in my pocket, just so we know. And this is fiat currency vulnerable to unlimited inflation. This is what destroys civilization. If your money is meaningless, how do you interact with everyone outside of your small circle of trust? Right? We're all limited psychologically by the Dunbar number. We can have like 150 people on a first name basis in our life. How do we interact with the other 8 billion in this sophisticated trading relationship if we don't have money? Well, inflation is what destroys money, and central banking is responsible for pushing limitless inflation on people. So I call fiat currency a monetary deception. It's a living lie, and it corrupts human beings and it corrupts our relationships, and it's used to violate property in perpetuity. And this brings me to the next thing I learned in Bitcoin, and that is that truth is essential for good outcomes. I think we all get this. It's not that complicated. You know, another definition of money is that it's an instrument for trading our time and energy, right? We're sacrificing our time and energy at work. We're receiving money. We're then taking that money into the market and redeeming it for similar sacrifices from others. So, time and energy. If you'll permit me to get a little nerdy for a second, the second law of thermodynamics, I think it's the second law, says energy is absolutely scarce. Like, you can't create any more of it. You can't counterfeit it. Same with time. So doesn't it make sense that we would have a money that is as scarce as the substance we're using to trade it for? So to be totally truthful, the supply of money must map onto the absolute scarcity of time and energy. And before Bitcoin, the only absolutely scarce things in the known universe were time and energy. So this is another lens on the breakthrough that is Bitcoin. We have invented something that maps perfectly onto time and energy. Never had that before. Fiat, on the other hand, very untruthful, as I've said. It diverges from truth as it's produced ad infinitum. This currency counterfeiting operation we call the central bank, the more they print, the more they violate the property rights of all dollar holders, or whatever the currency is. And it destroys people, destroys your relationship with your own time. They're stealing time from you. Okay? So fiat is the opposite of monetary truth that Bitcoin represents. And fiat is unpredictable money in an already unpredictable world. That's a real problem. Which brings me to the next thing that I learned by being in Bitcoin. And that is that the most predictable money wins. It outcompetes all the other ones. That's what gold was. We knew its supply, no matter how hard we tried, would increase slowly and most predictably over time. That's why we chose to store our wealth in gold as rational economic actors. Well, entrepreneurs, right? What's the wealth acquisition strategy of the entrepreneur? Taking risk, trading, making businesses, trying to create and implement new ideas into the world that are valuable to others. Okay? If I am successful, which is very unlikely as an entrepreneur, very low success rate, I want to take the proceeds, the wealth that I've acquired through that effort, and put it in a place that's risk minimized. Right? To say that it's most insulated from the uncertainties of the world. Right? That's what gives you the ability to build wealth across time. So, excuse me, I lost my place. Statist, the other wealth acquisition strategy, right? Entrepreneurs are making, statists are taking. So, even statists are actually taking risk, by the way, by taxing you. They're acquiring wealth by taking, but they're taking certain risk. But even they want to secure their wealth in something that's maximally certain, let's say. So people seek to shelter the wealth they acquire in the least risky assets, or another way to say this is trust minimized assets. The assets that allow us to not need to trust one another, or to trust one another the least. That's what gold was. So at 21 million, Bitcoin's firmly fixed supply is the most predictable money in human history. It's a perfectly predictable money supply. We all know what it is. We all know what it will be forever. So it is the ideal place to store wealth with certainty in an uncertain world. Okay. Which brings me to my last thing that I learned by being in Bitcoin. And I debated on what to call this, but I'll give you both ways that I put it. First is Bitcoin is an American idea. The other thing I was going to say is that Bitcoin is American as fuck. Because it is. As we open today, everything we say, do, or make starts out as an idea. The idea of freedom has been with us for a really long time, you know? We've been going through these iterations of building civilization, establishing property rights, trust, money, tools, but also maneuvering against one another to make sure that we don't open ourselves up to be stolen from. And that's how we zero in on all these useful tools, like gold was one of them, you know, et cetera. And life, liberty, and property. You've probably heard life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We screwed it up in the American Constitution, started in the 13th century Magna Carta. Life, liberty, property. These are the manifestations of freedom. Your life is your future, liberty is your present, property is your past. To lose your life is to lose your future, to lose your liberty is to be imprisoned, to lose your present, to lose your property is to lose the fruits of your past labor. Okay? They are the natural law expressions of freedom, life, liberty, and property. America is natural law's greatest implementation. We live it, we benefit from it, we have this huge surge of capital we've received from our ancestors. It's all around us, right? We're rich beyond imagination. To be average now is to be more wealthy than the richest guy in the world 100 years ago. A refrigerator. Do you guys have refrigerators? How amazing is a refrigerator? It keeps food cold for weeks. You can put stuff in a freezer. It's mind-blowing. Can you believe we figured this out? These are all miracles of the marketplace that we developed through free trade, through freedom, right? Freedom is what's created the most wealth. Not taking. You can't have a bunch of cavemen stealing from each other and a refrigerator come out of that. You need entrepreneurial action. You need property rights. So, problem in America today is that, like all states before it, taking is now becoming the predominant wealth strategy. Right? We're printing more money than ever. We're just eating the seed corn, right? We're destroying all of this generational wealth our forebears helped build for us. So, in my opinion, no matter your political leanings, I don't care about politics, Bitcoin is a vote against taking as a wealth acquisition strategy because it cannot be inflated, it cannot be stolen. And it's a vote for making as a wealth acquisition strategy. It's entrepreneurial money. It's what empowers entrepreneurs. You can put the fruits of your labor in deep freeze. You can put it in a place that no one can violate, no one can thaw, etc. So that is to say, Bitcoin is a vote against statism and a vote for entrepreneurship. So if you believe in honesty, if you believe in hard work, if you believe in thou shalt not steal, then you believe in Bitcoin, whether you know it or not. It is the most American technology that has ever existed, even though it was created by a guy named Satoshi Nakamoto. And it's, clearly I'm way down this Bitcoin rabbit hole. Some of you may think I'm crazy. But I think Bitcoin's more American than the US Constitution. Private property rights, rule of law, honest money. That's what our founding fathers wanted. That's what Bitcoin is. It's not scribbles on a document. It's principles implemented permanently in code, wrapped in incentives that make us all want to use it. It's almost an indescribably important tool. And that's why all the people in the Bitcoin rabbit hole with me, we spend thousands of hours talking about it, thinking about it, learning about it, etc. I think it's the greatest tool for human freedom that's ever existed. And I consider it the gateway to a higher echelon civilization. I actually think maybe civilization just really started with the invention of Bitcoin. It's a property relationship that cannot be corrupted by government or any counterparty. You hold your private keys, you hold information. You can put $1 billion in your brain and cross any border you want. It's a way to store wealth that is extremely hard to steal. How do you steal information? If it's properly custodied, you can't even torture somebody and get it. It is also the only human organization immune to human corruption. It is incorruptible money. We've never had anything like this. Everything man has created up until this point, man has been able to destroy. We're not so sure we could destroy Bitcoin at this point. I mean, I guess we could. We'd have to get everyone to act contrary to their own self-interest. And that's the magic of Bitcoin, is that it is this vortex of incentives that pays you to support its success. And that's why you can't ignore it. So, in my estimation, I think that's why Bitcoin is important. For freedom, for truth, and some might even say love. Thank you so much. Sure, yeah.
Because I know everybody wants to talk to him privately, but why not ask questions out here? Thanks so much.
Yeah.
If anybody, I'm going to go ahead and start it off. So you break things down on a philosophical level and what we would call like first principles. And you have a show called What is Money?
Yeah.
And everybody thinks what it is, but there's a bunch of different ideas. So when you break it down, you kind of understand on this level, it seems to like almost change every area of your life, right? When you learn what money is and you start to think about hard money, and it starts to give you like long-term perspective. And we talk about a lot of times when people kind of come in and opens their eyes and it starts to change their entire life, like change the way I eat, change the way I approach my relationships. What is it, that fundamental shift that you think then starts affecting the rest of those areas like that?
You know, I think we touched on a couple of the parts today that it is, property starting with self-ownership, that it is, there's this reality that we own ourselves. You can't even argue it away. But the state sort of tries to make an illusion otherwise.
Yeah. Right?
Like if your effective tax rate is 40%, you're working 5 months out of every year for the state. And this is we talked about this on your show actually.
Yeah.
If your effective tax rate is 100%, you are a slave. Right? All the fruits of your labor go to whoever that is, the tax authority. If your effective tax rate is 40%, then you're 40% a slave. Right? I think this
spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very destructive to our psychology, to our autonomy, to our existence, right? Humans are born to be free. That's what we've been doing the whole time. It's like freely acting, trying to create, wealth and good ways and bad ways, and we keep figuring out better systems to have more making and less taking, right? That's what America was.
Yep.
It was this rule of law, private property rights, honest money. It was a great domain for makers and a lot of prohibitions against takers.
Yeah.
And I think Bitcoin just takes it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
It's just taking is not even a wealth acquisition strategy anymore. So to try to answer your question, I mean, I'd say it's time preference, kind of the Austrian economic thing.
Yeah.
When you can store your wealth predictably long term, you start to think long term.
Right. And all good decisions come long term.
Yeah, exactly.
See, we get some questions. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Mike. So obviously I love Bitcoin, I love gold, I love silver, I love anything that's not controlled by the government, right? But the same way, the same way that they corrupted gold, right? With how you mentioned, we make paper certificates. At some point, I think the same thing can happen with Bitcoin. I'm just curious to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a commonly brought up point, and I would say the one fundamental difference, we talked about the portability of gold briefly. That's a technological shortcoming of gold, right? Like as money, this is one of the key properties of money is portability.
Agreed.
Gold really lacked portability. That created incentives to centralize its custody and issue currency on top of it. Bitcoin does not suffer from that. Does not suffer from portability at all, actually. You can move it at the speed of light anywhere in the world, 24/7. So I would say that's one piece to it. The other piece is that we can establish cryptographic certainty of reserves. So you can audit the total supply of Bitcoin right now running a full node. You could also choose to only custody your Bitcoin if you didn't self-custody and you're going to use a custodian. Only use custodians that allow you to cryptographically prove their reserves so they can't bullshit you. They can't run a currency counterfeiting or a fractional reserve operation on you. So I think over time, the market will tend to favor those custodians that are honest because individuals have the power to call their bluff.
We're gonna ask some other questions. All right.
Okay.
One thing I would add to that too, and listen to his show, What Is Money? He did the Sailor series, which is incredible. And there was a point, I think episode 14, whatever it was, where you talked about gold being a base layer, and then we have layers on top of it. And the protocol itself isn't scalable. You can't build on the gold protocol.
Right.
But the Bitcoin protocol we can build off
Correct.
of. So even technologically, it's different. Yeah. Listen to What Is Money show. Listen to the Sailor series. It will open up your eyes from everything.
Yeah.
Let's go over here. I know you've been standing there.
Hi, Robert, you're a rock star. Love everything that you do.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's for the people in this room because I think everyone here is hoping that Bitcoin crashes to 3,000 and then we'll back up the truck. But for people at home, right? So if we go home and we talk to 5 neighbors who just don't really get it, what would you say is that caveman or 5-year-old elevator pitch quickly to just explain the volatility as to why someone should get into it? And that's probably harder because you're trying to explain it in very simple terms, a complex topic, but that's probably what I've had the most trouble with is that just, if I don't say it super quick, can you explain the volatility? I don't, whatever. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to give you 2 answers. One would be my 5-minute or 30-second elevator pitch for just Bitcoin. Someone sees my tattoo or knows, or they're like, "What's Bitcoin?" I'm like, all right, here you go. It's a non-counterparty insurance policy on central banking. So it's the more dollars they print, the more valuable this policy becomes. But you don't, I say non-counterparty, it's a little technical, but you don't need to go and redeem it with an insurance company, right? It's just, you hold it. It's like holding gold or anything else. So that's important for Bitcoin specifically, but on the volatility, I think it has to do with what you are thinking through, right? We're thinking through dollars to interpret the Bitcoin price. So that's one key point. And then the one that would probably resonate best actually is that market cap and volatility are inverse. So if you look at something like Amazon that crashed 90+% in 2001, I think, had double-digit drawdowns repeatedly over the past 20 years, but it's up 50,000% in the past 20 years. It's almost like a smaller boat on a pond with ripples in it is going to move a lot more. It's going to have a lot more volatility versus something very large. So as the market cap of anything, any asset, an equity, or Bitcoin even grows, its volatility declines. So as the network becomes deeper and more liquid, you have less volatility overall, price volatility. All right. And the data proves it out. So you can also be like, just go, don't believe me, go check it out. So. Hello?
Hey, how's it going? Hello, John Paul Cruz, thank you for your time. I have 2 questions, one of them much faster to answer than the next. This is kind of like a personal preference. Do you have a preferred ledger wallet for storing things like Bitcoin and stuff like that, rather than
So I recommend geographically distributed multi-sig. Sounds kind of sophisticated, but there's companies that help people do this. Casa is one, Unchained Capital is another. All this means is that you're taking the private key, which is the bearer asset representing your Bitcoin, right? Your password, if you want to use that analogy, chopping it into pieces. You can make it 2 or 3, 3 or 5, whatever your quorum is, and then you can distribute those shards geographically. So now you get 2 things, basically. You get self-sovereignty. You don't really have you have minimized counterparty risk, and you have redundancy. So if you lose part of your key or one of your shards, you have others. And I think that is just the best of both worlds, frankly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. So I was speaking to some people here. We have a family business. Somebody gave a fantastic idea that we should provide some sort of discount to customers if they're going to pay in Bitcoin. I think that's phenomenal and substantial. Do you recommend anything close and/or similar to that? Just any good ideas you have off top to further implement this to make other people want to join in? Like, oh, discount on Bitcoin. Why wouldn't I do that? Do you have anything like that? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think no, it's a great way. Like if you offer customers discount, cash pay discounts or Bitcoin pay discounts, that's great. There are also companies that help do that. There's one, OpenNode, I believe they help merchants you can take in Bitcoin and even receive cash. Like even if you want nothing to do with Bitcoin, you could still set a pay me in Bitcoin option on your website and convert it all to cash or 50% or none of it. You have the option. So there's tools out there for it. And I think it's a net benefit no matter what, because if nothing else, you're opening up your business to another market, right? There's people out there with Bitcoin wealth. They want to spend it sometimes, not a lot of us. Changes when number goes up, so that you might get a little kick on your business in Bitcoin bull market.